Uh, if you guys have any questions or you want to ask anything, you may ask right away, or maybe in the middle of session also you can unmute yourself. So I have a request for you. Can you guys just turn on your camera for like some time? Like just need to take a pic for the. So if you guys can do it, that would be very helpful. Can you guys turn on your cameras? Not getting an option. I'll just check. Do we have anything? No option available. I'll just check 1 second. Give me a minute. Just so the thing is, I've started using Zoom very recently, so I'm just finding it difficult. Stop. Um, okay, that's not an issue. I'll just we can do that at the end as well. So okay, you are unable to speak as well. So I think mute. Mute. Um, okay, so I think I'm not getting an option to give you the right to unmute yourself or turn on the camera. So we can use the chat as well to ask the question. So it's fine, I think, yeah. Mm. So for the people who are asking, can we access session recording after this session? So I won't be providing recordings as of now. Most probably after like a few months, I will provide like 2, 3 months later, I will be providing the recordings to you guys as well, but not at this point. Uh, ठीक है. I think yeah, someone posted it's a webinar setup, so host can only turn on camera. So ठीक है, that's perfectly fine. We can go ahead with this. So ठीक है. So how many of you? So I think we can start with the session. So we have around 96 participants as of now. So I think, yeah. So how many of you have given any system design interview or are aware of what system design interviews actually are? मतलब if you can put it in the chat, that would be good. मतलब has anyone here given any interview experience earlier, मतलब for system design, front-end system design? Okay, तो ठीक है, I'll just start with, ठीक है, aware of most, many of the people are aware, some are not, so I'll just start with what front-end system design interviews generally look like. So you must be aware of front-end UI tech rounds, right? So what happens in UI tech? I'll answer all the chats after like some time, so I'm not looking at the chat right now, so we can start with the session. So what happens generally in system design round is you will have to, you will be given a problem statement and you will have to design a solution to it. So the solution would be, the solution can be anything. So, uh, s- so you have to propose how will you, what all features you will be putting in those solution, what all things extra you will be doing in that, how will you optimize it, how will you make it accessible, what tech choices you will be making. So that's how a basic front-end system design interview looks like. So it is not like your normal machine coding or a UI tech round where you just can learn, like in machine coding you just need to know the basic logic and the data structure to use and the basic programming concept, the vanilla JavaScript or React concepts would be fine. But in the system design round, what generally will happen to you is they will give you a problem statement and you have to design end-to-end solution to it. And by end-to-end, I mean everything. How will you design your application? How will you uh, store state in it, what technologies you will be using, why you will be using those technologies, and what is the advantage of using one technology over the other. So that's how a normal system design interview look like. So if you want to know what are some of the popular system design questions, so there are like you can matlab, in the front end system design round they can tell you to design any front end application which you have seen. They may ask you to design a e-commerce website like Flipkart or Swiggy. They can tell you to design a seat booking app like a Book My Show, or they can ask you to design a system like Jira, which you guys must have been using in your current orgs as well. Matlab you can be asked to design anything, Google Sheets, Google Docs, and whatnot. So that is how the normal system design interview works. So matlab, I'll just tell you what are all the expectation in this round. So this call will be around like 1 to 2 hours, or it can extend even further. So here in this, I'll be just telling you what all things you need to consider while approaching your system design round, and what all things you need to know, what you need to tell to your interviewer, and so on. So this is just an intro video, so intro session, and after this, there would be like couple of more sessions organized based on the responses of this session and the feedbacks. So in total, there would be 8 to 9 sessions overall, mostly on Saturdays, the same time which we are doing right now. Mostly on alternate Saturdays, I will be doing it. So I think if I'll just answer few of the chat questions if you guys have. Okay, we can use chat. So Nihal has asked if you could explain for how much experience candidate this system design round is required. So originally the system design round was intended for like 2 or 2.5 years plus experience. So about 2.5 years they used to ask. But in the recent times, they are asking this to juniors as well. So as of now, like many teams in Flipkart, if you interview them for a UI1 position as well, like 1 year of experience, they will have a product sense round. And the product sense round is the same as the system design round. They call it a product sense. So this is something which even freshers are being asked right now. So you need to learn all about it. Although the expectation from fresher would be very less, so you don't have to be pixel perfect in everything you are saying, but it's been asked to freshers as well. So that's a point. You need to learn it. Uh, So yeah, in system design, do we need to code as well? So you don't need to code everything, but you may need to code the basic component architecture. So how many components you will be making, what props you will be passing into it, that you need to code and show. Let's say you created a component, ABC component, let's say, and you are passing some props. So in that you need to code and show ki this is the ABC component and this is the props I will be passing and this is how I will be using the props. So this is something like uh, coding. The code which you will be writing won't be just for the preciseness or the syntax wise. It will be just used for the logic, how well you are designing the component logic and what props you are sending. So syntax won't be checked there, just the logic would be checked. So not that hard. The pseudocode, kind of pseudocode you will be doing. So is it mandatory for frontend to do DSC and JavaScript? We can answer this question for like apart from system design for all other answer we can check at the end. What is difference between HLD and LLD? So HLD is basically the high level design which you guys make. So high level design is basically what components you will be using, how your UI will interact with the backend, how your UI will store the state. So like the high level, the basic. When you start designing, you will be designing the HLD first. So HLD is like the thing key you will be uh, designing just the basic wireframe, how many components will be there, not even that, so how many structure UI components would be there like on the very huge level, and how will they react to, how will they interact with the state, how will they interact with the server, how will they make API call, how will they make caching. That would be a very high level design which initially you will be making. Low level design is something which is very granular level. So there you can show what data structure you will be using, what architecture you will be using, uh, performance algorithm, and all those stuff. So that's what the difference between HLD and LLD. We will check back on HLD and LLD in some time. So I'll just uh, so I think we can start with that. So I'll share my screen and I'll just give you like a checkbox on what things you need to do and what things. Uh, okay, and LLD we need to code. We don't have to code on LLD as well. So that's LLD. They may ask you to code. मतलब, a pseudo code would be required, but not a complete code. So mostly HLD and LLD rounds are mostly whiteboard discussions, but sometimes they may ask you to write a pseudo code. So that is something you need to be aware of. LLD is not like machine coding, but you just need to tell. मतलब mostly these are discussions. मतलब HLD and LLD rounds are like discussions, and at the end they may ask you to write a pseudocode. How your component will look like, what props you will be sending, what. मतलब you don't need to write a complete working code for that. So so I think we can start. So mostly this system design. My screen is visible, right? If someone can confirm on the chat. Yes. Okay. So there are so mostly front end system design rounds, or mostly any system design round happens in any whiteboard. So mostly it is whiteboard discussions. So you need to, that's my personal suggestion. You can use your VS Code as well for writing things, but I prefer any platform. Like I use this Excel draw. So here you can just draw anything, write anything, and so you have multiple options. You can create flowchart, you can write text over here, you can add images. So a lot of things you can do here. So mostly what I have heard from people and what I have personally used is they used some online platform like Excel draw, and there are many others. So you can use any of them. So I would recommend spending some time on any one platform so that you are familiar with anything. So, like in the interview, you won't be like, "Ki, I am just using this for this platform for the first time. I don't know how to create a text." So that thing shouldn't happen. So be familiar with either of the platform. I would suggest Accelerator to be one of them. And so I'll just this would be this session is basically focused on how you will approach your next system design round. So if you are in a system design round, what things you need to focus on. So I'll just give you a initial from let's start. So the first point which you need to uh, focus on is, okay, the font is very small. Um, so so the first thing is requirements. So for the first thing, matlab, as soon as the interviewer explains you the question, if you have any clarifying question, just ask him. So let's say here the question which we have got is from the interviewer is a designer, let's say e-commerce site like Flipkart. So let's say this is your question. So So as soon as you get a question, the first thing you, if you have anything, you can ask like if you have any clarifying question like, matlab, what all things is required. So matlab, those things you can ask the interviewer and write it in the requirements part. So is this font good enough or it's small for you guys? Do I need to zoom in with the font? It's good, right? Okay, take it. Thanks. So the first part, it starts with the requirements. So in the requirement, again, there are two things. So there is a functional requirements and then there are non-functional requirements. So functional requirements are basically the requirement which needs to be present on the on the website. Like let's say you have been asked a question, design an e-commerce site like Flipkart. So functional one is the one which the users will be seeing. So the users can see anything and okay. So the users can see anything and how it will be interacting. So for the functional requirement, you can write for like, let's say for an e-commerce site, you can write things like user should be able to click on item and go to add to cart. User should be able to purchase item. Payment methods should be present. Method should be there. Method should be there. Apart from that, what are other functional requirement which you guys can think of? Like what all things you can do on a e-commerce site? You can add a payment method. Uh, there would be images. So if you are, matlab initially you won't have to design whole of the Flipkart. So in this case, you just have to design the homepage of the Flipkart. So in the homepage, you should be able to add to cart. You can purchase any item. Payment method won't be required on a homepage, so I think we can remove it as of now. Uh, Space item, and then on the homepage, what else you need? You will be requiring cards, right? So if you see the Flipkart homepage, so here if you see, you will be having these cards. You will be having a carousel like this. You will be having a nav bar at the top. You will be having a section where you can go for any categories. So you can just think of all the scenarios and like purchase item. Okay. So the third thing can be you can carousel should be present. A carousel for banner images, cards for item. Then we can have drop down category selector. So functional requirements are basically what the user will be seeing. So that's something you need to write all the probabilities. So I won't be going deep into this. You can figure it out later. Register, yeah, I've got some suggestions. So basically, we can clarify the interviewer if there is any specific website I need to design. So you can ask this question: ki is it like if the interviewer has given you design an e-commerce site, so you can clarify ki uh, can I do it something like Flipkart, or you, that's up to you how much interactive you can make the session. So it's basically a discussion kind of round. So you can ask them ki what I am, like, can I design something like flipkart.com or something very new, that can make your job easy actually, so that you can do. And I've got some suggestions. Product catalog, yeah, product catalog is something. Search bar, and then sorting filter, yeah, this again. These are the functional requirements. So you can just so you can add few more points, but ideally for an interview round, you can use the at least you need to mention 4 to 5 functional requirements. So why the interviewer expect you to write good functional requirement is the interviewer want to check how good you can think. So these things are basically, if you have never designed something, you won't, or you have never worked on that, you, it's about your creativity, how much creative you can think and how much more you can think. So basically, this search bar is something which is very essential for a e-commerce site. So the interviewer wants you to think in all possible ways. So what all things can be present. So it's like how good you can think. So this is the usage of mentioning why functional requirements are required. So coming to non-functional requirements. So non-functional functional requirements basically includes topics like why are we doing something. So no, here if you can see non-functional requirement, you need to add points like so, non-functional requirements are requirements basically which are not seen to user but will make your platform better. So let's say what things you can do to make your website better. So what is the main thing in an e-commerce website? If you see any e-commerce website, the first thing which we see is the images, right? So how you can optimize these images? Uh, So that thing you can put it in non-functional requirement, optimize image loading. How you can optimize, we can see it later. So after that, yeah, some people have mentioned accessibility and performance. So what performance optimization you can take? So optimization, you have to be specific in this. So if you are writing performance optimization, you can write things like lazy loading, code splitting, using CDN for images. So for optimize image loading, what you can do is you can use CDN for uh, image loading. So it's kind of a discussion round. So you need to have a good discussion. So you need to be good at that. Apart from that, what are the non-functional requirements you can think about? Uh, Adding shimmer, yeah, someone adding shimmer for performance. Correct. This can be done. So generally, it's not good for performance, but it's good for user. I think adding shimmer would more of be a functional requirement because shimmer is something which the user will be seeing, and it won't be good for it won't be contributing much to performance, but it would be good for user experience. Apart from that, yeah, API calls, someone said. So how will you making API calls and what tech stack you will be using? So API calls, we will cover it later in further parts. So what tech stack you will be using and why. So if you are saying React, I will be using React. You should be good to know ki why would be using React. So that's the point. React, but why? So why would be using that? So other non-functional requirement is something. So if you see on a e-commerce site, so as it won't end even if you scroll a lot. So I think the website desktop site will end at some time, but for applications for mobile view, if you see, if you can go to the mobile view and check yourself. So mostly what will happen in the mobile view, it is like an infinite scrolling. So even if you reach the end, it will load more products. So how will you tackle that? So this is again a performance optimization which you can do. So here, tackle tackle long, heavy DOM component on infinite scroll. So basically what will happen is if there are infinite scroll on the mobile set, you can see. If you scroll, like I will show you right away. So let's refresh. So I think, so if you scroll a lot, it will just go down, and it will load a lot of, if you see a lot of components would be loaded. So these things would get added to the DOM, and at the end, there will be so many DOM components that your page will crash. So I can show you one example where this thing is really an issue. So you can go to linkedin.com and, like, let's say, scroll a lot. So you can put a script and go for scrolling. So it will, like, you can put a script for scroll by, and just let it run for like 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the page will crash. The whole linkedin.com will crash. So I have personally done that like few months back. I'm not sure whether it still happens or not, but that's an thing which you need to tackle. So how will you tackle? You can just use things like windowing or virtualization. So these are the non-functional requirements. You can think of much more. Matlab, how will you optimize performance, or how will you make the experience good for the user? Uh, so the second thing which you need to do is, after matlab, the interview for the front end system design would be just 1 hour. So in 1 hour, you have to cover a lot of things. So these are just one of the few things which you need to cover. So you don't take more than 3 to 4 minutes to complete this functional and non-functional requirement, because the other parts will take a lot of your time, and there will be a couple of cross questions as well. Okay, I have got few chat virtual will infinite scrolling with functional requirement or non-functional requirement. Ideally, infinite scrolling can be a functional requirement, but this is function infinite scroll is a functional can be a functional requirement, but non-functional requirement can be optimizing infinite scroll. So infinite scroll should be a functional requirement only, but the non-functional part of it can be how will you tackle your website when there are too many infinite scrolls. So that you can think of. Uh, is authentication comes under non-func. Ideally, you can put it authentication is something you can put under functional requirement, and for the non-functional part, you can put it as a optimizing or adding security for the authentication. Uh, so that you can think of server-side rendering or client-side rendering approach. So this approach we will come back at later point. Server-side will touch upon later. So this is the first part which you can spend at least, like, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes max. So requirements part is done for now as of now. The second part is the architecture. So HLD architecture. So architecture design is something which you can do. So basic architecture, I'll just show you a sample architecture design, how it does. Great front end. So have you guys used this website? Like it has some great system design content. You can check it later, but this is how you can just read one of these blogs by them. So this is something very good. You can try. So this is how something a high level diagram looks like. So I'll share the link. So two of the sessions they have is free and rest are paid. I have their lifetime subscription, so I haven't logged in yet. So once I log in, I'll have the access to all. So this is just a session, that's just a high level design, how you will be making. So a high level design, as I said earlier, it's a very top level design, how the things will look like. So we will be having a server, we will be having a client. This client is basically, screen is visible, right? This hierarchy design diagram. Yes, okay. So here we have a client and a server. This client is your browser, and inside the client we have a controller. The controller, if you know React and if you have used React Redux and Redux in your React or Angular application, you must be aware of controller in client store. And this is the feed UI. So feed UI, this is for a news feed side. So news, how you will be seeing on your Facebook, like a Facebook post. So here we will be having a client side code. Here we will be having a controller and a client store. So this controller will be directly in communication with a client store and feed data. And here we have multiple components which you can think of. So feed post, feed composer. So this thing is HLD. So HLD is like very upper se you can say, like a very high level diagram. So in high level, this is what it is like. There are two components in the UI, and those will be communicating with the controller, and the controller will be communicating with the client store and JSON. So this much simple an HLD diagram can be. So just you need to think of what all components you will be making over here, and what things it would be like. A basic things, the controller would be the Redux controller, client store can be the Redux store. Controller is something reducer in case of Redux. Yes, it's controller is something like reducer, you can say. Uh, that's the correct point, Arvind. So this is how basic HLD diagram look like. You can add few more things into that, and you can explain how the things would work. This is a very simple diagram, I would say. There are more complicated diagrams. So you can, it's up to you how much you can uh, think of and what you can design it. So at this point, I won't be going by deep into the architecture diagram. You can just Google it and see later. And you again can spend 4 to 5 minutes in that. Not 5 minutes, would be less. 4 to 8, 5 to 8, 6 to 8 minutes would be enough for architecture diagram. So you can just create a diagram like one would be a client, one would be a server, and a cross communication you can show. So you can just do this thing, right? So it will take 6 to 8 minutes max, and you can explain what all things and what the reducer will do, what the client will do, and those stuffs. So this would be a like fairly simple thing to do, architecture diagram. But the thing is, just think before you start drawing. So I would say keep a paper and pen with you every time, and as soon as you find anything, just write. If you think of anything, just write it on the paper and pen. So that's something which you can do before writing it, because if you write something and then you proceed further, then there is no way that you can come back and change what you have done earlier, because you are changing the whole architecture and every subsequent thing would be changing. So think twice before drawing the architecture diagram. Then we have the third part of this API contract design, which is one of the most important. API contract design and methods to use and tech for API calls. So in this method, the first thing you have to do is what all API calls you will be making. If it is a post call, what would be the uh, let's say payload you will be sending? If it is a get call, how will you be expecting the data? So again, this is a place where you can spend some time with the interviewer, asking for what exactly, telling what exactly you think and asking for his suggestions as well. So here in this case, like let's say the first API call would be slash, let's say products. It can be a get call, and what exactly you can the response you can just show. This can be this is a very simple thing I'm showing. Think twice before uh, designing your API calls. So here you can get list of products. Here it can be an array of data which you will be sending. Uh, so this would be a first product call. Apart from that, well, I'm just saying this, not necessarily this is what you have to write. Then there can be a catalog call. Uh, this can again be a get call, and not catalog, I meant carousel data, or maybe a single call you can get all the data from. So in the slash products page, there will be a product data. There can be a carousel which we initially defined. Carousel can again be an array of data with images and data. There can be a banner component data where you can get the data for the banner. There can be a couple of the tech stack part. I will be coming back in some time. So the tech stack we will come back in some time. And for yeah, you are correct, Ritik. You have to tell the interviewer what all APIs you would be requiring and how you will be designing the APIs. How will you be designing the response? So this API design part ideally needs to be designed by the front end only, not by the back end. So you should be the one who should be deciding it. And then you can, so in this, you can think of other API calls like uh, slash add to cart. Like let's say there is an add to cart functionality over there that can be a post call. And for the contracts for this, you can add things like product ID. So product ID is something, list of product ID you can send. Uh, and after this post call, these things would be added to your cart. So basically, you need to think of what all API calls you can make. So the best way to think about is, let's say if you are making a e-commerce website, go to the flipkart.com website and just inspect their tab and check for the network tab what all API calls they are making actually. Get inspired from them. Go to amazon.com, just check what are they doing. So that this is, I believe this is the best way to do it. So if you are making preparing for system design, go to the specific website and think of what all can be done. So product details. So you can add your API calls which you can think of. This is just a very basic thing. You need to be more specific, like what data this product will contain. So it will be an array of object, right? So here the product name would be there. The product price would be there. Keep it as minimal as it is, because increasing API response would end of the day halt your website, because large API responses will take some time to load, right? So this we cover the API contract design. The second part is tech for API calls. So tech, basically I meant what technologies you will be using. So there are a couple of things you must be aware of, right? So there are things like REST APIs, we have GraphQL, we have WebSocket calls, we have WebRTC. Apart from that, we have servers. So these are the things. REST GraphQL. So these are the things you need. You can talk about. So which you will be using. So in this case, there are product call and add to cart. So what you will be using? Will you be using the REST APIs? Will you be using the GraphQL API, GraphQL? Will you be designing a socket call, matlab making a socket IO connection and making socket calls? Or you will be using WebRTC. So for that you need to be aware of what all these things are. So these things, but the rest is basically you can make, get, put, post calls like the way you do. That's the very basic thing. The second one is GraphQL. So the thing about GraphQL is, if you guys don't know, just read about it. So in a nutshell, if what GraphQL is, it will have a GraphQL is a query language. So here means the query language. GraphQL is a query language generated, I think, by Facebook. So what generally GraphQL does is, it will like, let's say you are making this slash product wala API call via GraphQL. So in this case, let's say you just want the products data and you don't want the carousel or banner component in this case. So you can pass the parameters to GraphQL call that I just need a product. So products data. So as soon as you pass the product data, it will just return you this. You won't be getting the carousel or banner component. So based on the input you provide, it will give you those specific outputs. So the advantages of GraphQL here would be, uh, you can just matlab the API responses would be much smaller. Let's say like you earlier, this whole response was being returned from REST, but in GraphQL, just products would be returned. So API size of API call would be reduced a lot. So that will be a faster API response and eventually a faster loading experience for your users. So this is what one example of GraphQL would be. But then again, there are disadvantages which you need to be aware of. We will cover it in further sessions. Then there are socket calls, which are real-time calls. And then again, there are WebRTC, which are again real-time. And the differences between socket and WebRTC you need to be aware of. So just read about it. In the future session, I will be dedicatedly covering all these topics. So that you can wait off. Then there is again authentication, matlab the tech part, the authentication, you can theoretical knowledge of GraphQL, so there will be enough. Yeah, ideally, I would say a theoretical knowledge of GraphQL and Socket would be enough. The advantages, disadvantages, what goodness it can bring, how will it negatively impact, does your project even you require GraphQL? So those things are enough for you. That you don't need to code in GraphQL, just knowing about it is enough for you. So these are the things. Apart from that, we can go to, matlab, after this API contract and discussions, the next part would be this coding standard. So how will you? Okay, we can come back to it later. We can go to tech stacks as of now. Tech choices basically. What tech choices you will be making? So will you be designing your website in React.js, Svelte, Angular, and why? Matlab, whatever you are using, you can use anything, but why would you be using it? So if you're saying React.js, why React.js is good? Does it offer better performance, or you can give your points? Why would you be using React.js? Okay, time spent, like you can spend at least for the API wala, you can spend at least 5 to 10 minutes. That's an important aspect, so you don't skip that. Tech choices is something you can uh, ask first the framework or the library you will be using. So here you can just check why React.js or why Svelte or why Angular. Then the other thing is the web view. If you are aware of a web view, just ask the interviewer what platform will you be using, platform where it will be used. So it will be a desktop platform or an app or a mobile site, whatever it is. So based on that also you need to make your tech choice. So uh, let's say you have to design an app, site, and desktop all for a given statement. So for app, you cannot use React.js, or you can use it. So here again, the comes is React Native. So React Native can also kick in. Then we have for app, we can use the web views as well with React. So what will you be using? So would you be using React Native for app or web views for your app? Web views is basically rendering React inside your native application. So it has its own pros and cons, but you can well learn about it. I'll be covering all of this in future sessions. So you can ask this question as well: ki app is required or not? If app is required, we can use React Native. Uh, but then again, if you're using React Native, then for desktop and website, you will be using React, and for app, you will be using React Native. Again, you will have to maintain two different repos, correct? So that's again something not good. Uh, so that you can think of how will you optimize it. You should be knowing that React Native is something which is available for web as well. So you can host your website in React Native as well. So just think about, मतलब explore on this topic कि you can use React Native on web, but how performant is that and how good is that, that you can explore and come up. I don't want to spoon feed you. मतलब I would like you guys to go and research on these topics, so that will be something much better for you. Uh, and then there are tech choices in the inside tech choices. What you can say is, so there can be a case of polling. So let's say you are using a, you guys are aware about polling, right? So what happens in polling is, UI will make continuous call to get some data like after 10 minutes. So inside polling also we have some other stuffs like long polling and server sent events. So these things again you can just go and check about that. So if you have to implement polling, how will you implement polling? That you can tell. If there is a use case of polling or server sent event, you can check that. So server sent event can be used for notification. Sorry. So notification generally you see on any app, the server sends a uh, the server sends a notification to your app, and the app shows you a notification. So this is how server sent event works. Then there is long polling kind of thing which you can see. So okay, okay. I'll just SSC server sent events. Okay, yeah. One more question which Rishabh asked: monorepo or micro front end. So again, this is a good thing I missed. Monorepo versus micro front end. So what will you be using? So if it's a very small application, you can use the monorepo kind of thing. But if it is growing exponentially, you can use a micro front end. So you need to be aware what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. And you can go on to this monorepo versus micro repo. Tech choices is something you need to spend a lot of time, at least like 10 minutes minimum you can spend. So this is where the interviewer will check why, what choices you make. So generally the thing is what other tech choices you, how you can make the different tech choices, how optimized approach you can take and other stuff. So these are the things which you can, there are many other things like uh, tech choices. Inside tech choices you can but just think of it, there can be many other things. If you are using hooks for state tech choices, sorry, or for the state, what would you use? Would you use Redux.js or context API, and why would you use that? So this is again another, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. So yeah, matlab, for everything, you just need a theoretical knowledge in this tech choices. So theoretical knowledge would be good. So even for React and Angular, you can just say React can give better performance in this case, and why Angular won't be that suitable, or why Svelte won't be that suitable. uh, trade of knowledge is critical. Uh, okay. And then what you can, other things you can think of is how will you, these are the basic things. You can just explore it later. I'll just move ahead. Do we discuss SSR versus, you can discuss SSR versus CSR here and why it is good or why it is bad and what are the advantages. So yeah, SSR versus CSR can be something you can think of. So SSR is basically server side rendering. Uh, so here in server side rendering, what generally happens is thus the website client side rendering. So generally React is client side rendered. So what happens in client side rendering is your in your HTML which you get from the server is basically empty and it is getting populated on the front end. So this is good. This is bad for SEO, search engine optimization. So, but if you want to make your website interactive, a lot of states are there. Then in that case, client side rendering can be beneficial. For server side rendering, the whole website gets rendered on the server and you just see a final page on loading. So this is very good for SEO, but it is terrible for cases like where you need to manage state because server cannot manage state. I think with Next.js latest version, this is problem is also solved with server side. Uh, so this is something you can study more server side rendering to use or client side rendering to use, or is there any other approach? So there are multiple other approach. One of the thing which Flipkart uses is, if you see the Flipkart desktop site, it uses a mix of, let's say, go to the orders page, you can just check it later. So if you go to orders page, you can just see uh, we just do the server side rendering for the skeleton. So for the whole skeleton is server rendered, but the client side, matlab the data for the customer is client side rendered. So if you the initial skeleton is being loaded from the server and just the data is being populated from the client side. So Flipkart is kind of a mix of SSR plus CSR. Flipkart is a mix of SSR plus CSR, which you can check. You can explore other sites. Uh, Yeah, there are other things, SSG or ISR, you can explore it later. CSR can be bad for yes, CSR is bad for first. The CSR is very bad for many web vitals, which can be solved via server side rendering. So you can check it. How SSR helps in SEO. So for that, I need to explain you about what SEO is and how it works. So you can just Google it, you will get to know. So basically, in short, SSR gives you a whole HTML in response. So once the page is loaded, you have the whole HTML, and having a whole HTML is way more better than SEO rather than giving a empty page, which happens in client side. So this is again a tech choices wala thing. So you can, if you have anything else, you can add over here. This is just a very basic I'm saying. Then the coding standards, you can think of what you can do. Like coding standards. By coding standard, I'll just explain what I meant. So coding standards basically, if would you be using TypeScript in your React code. So React was initially built for JavaScript, JSX, but you can use TypeScript as well, right? So would you use TypeScript? If you will you be using, why would you use? Because if you add TypeScript, then you need to add more dependencies. A lot of extra code has been written for types and inferences. So what advantages would it bring? What developer productivity it can, how much developer productivity it can increase. So You can think about these topics like what is developer productivity, how would you increase it, how TypeScript is helpful for that, how TypeScript can. So these things can be checked here. Apart from that, what other things you can add in your repo, which will make things easier for the developer, like or for coding. So coding standard first is TypeScript usage. The second one is error boundaries in your application. So these are the things you can add miscellaneously. So error boundaries, if you know, if you find any error in React, so what React will do is it will blank out the whole screen. But in error boundaries, it would just matlab, it would catch those error and won't make the whole page go white. Like you have seen the error pages, right? The pages go white in React if there is any error. So you can use error boundaries to minimize those. Why it is useful and how it can be done, you can explore it later. Then there are API failures. How will you be handling it in the code? Then there is folder structure is one thing. Folder structure, how will you be making a folder structure? Like the inside the source, you have a source folder in React, right? Inside the source, what are folders you will be making? What are files you will be making? How will you be making your logic separate? How will you make the reducer logic different? So those folder structure is something you can think of. What other things you can think of is adding packages for everything. Matlab, this is again something you can explore later. If you want to add a new feature, what do you think is better? Like, let's say you have to make a deep clone of something. So what would you do? Would you use the Lodash library to do that? We have a Lodash library which has inbuilt utility for doing these things, or you will be writing your own custom function. So these things you can ask. You can tell basically ki what I am thinking. Then there is how reusable you can make your code, how modular you can make your code. I think these two things should not be here. Folder structure, modular code, how much it is. Then you have pre-commit hooks. So before committing, you can just have some uh, commit rules ki before committing this, all things should be there. And then there is lint checkers. You can add linting to your website. So this is again you can just tell. So don't spend much time into this, but 2 to 3 minutes would be fine. And then what else you can add here for the structure? How maintainable your code is. So that thing you can low maintenance code. By low maintenance, I mean by low maintenance, I mean the thing, if you're making a component, so if someone wants to make a very small change to it, they don't have to uh, change a lot of places. Just changing it in one place should suffice. So in large application, what generally happens is if the maintaining this part is not taken care initially. So if you just want to uh, hide a button in UI, you have to change in 5 different pages. Ideally, it should be changed in a ideally it should be changed in only just one file, right? But if you that's something, if you don't focus on this part in initial coding, initial when the repo is starting, then this issue will happen a lot. So here what will happen, just to hide a button, you have to change file in 10 different components or 5 different components. What config driven UI can be done. So in Flipkart, if you see in the order details page on my orders page, it's config driven. So the config is being sent by the backend. So backend sends the config, and based on the config, we just render the UI. So UI is more or less controlled by the backend. Unit testing is something you can add here. Okay, we can cover testing in next steps. Uh, okay, then again, a testing, I would I would like this is a very important aspect which you can tell how good you are with testing. So testing is something which is another important aspect for building an application. So we have different type of testing: unit testing, integration. We have E2E testing. We have accessibility testing. We have API testing. Basically, we check for the contracts if any contracts are changed or not. So these are the things. So unit testing is basically uh, testing each unit. So let's say you have created a component. So how is that component working with a given set of input? Integration. Integration testing is basically different testing different component with each other. E2E testing is checking full end-to-end flow. So this uses Cypress and Puppeteer and a lot of things. It will just re-render your whole application inside the test environment and check. It will check if the button is working, if this is not working. Like it will, so having testing test cases is very important, because if in future someone changes the code and accidentally some feature is getting disabled, so if the initial test cases written are very good, then the error will be caught in testing phase itself, rather than going into production and getting escalations that this is not working or this is the issue. Uh, then there is accessibility testing. So if you do some lighthouse testing, they have a tab for accessibility. So accessibility is something which is very much required. Like in accessibility, you can think of background and foreground contrast. So if you see a Flipkart website, this is a white background with a black text. So this is highly accessible. But if you go to some other website, there can be a case that they have a pink background with black text. So in that case, they won't, but the text won't be that visible in, or maybe accessibility issues might come. So this is something accessibility test many companies do. Then there is API testing if there is any change in contract. So this is a very basic thing. It's like unit test cases you can think of. Do we take care of logging mechanism? This is something which you can, uh, yeah, this is something I'll come back later. Uh, Logging mechanism is there. So I'll cover in some time. Keyboard tabs and NVDA used for accessibility. Yeah, keyboard tabs you can check. Matlab basically how accessible is your website using keyboard. That thing, testing library like React users. You can use anything like React testing library or Enzyme, just whatever it is, you can use it. That I don't think would be an issue. So you don't need to discuss what exactly you will be using. You can just say why unit testing is important, and then you just know, you need to know the definition and how things work and how unit testing will prevent future accidents. So you just need to know the basics and the pros and cons. So this is how integration testing. What is a contract in API contract? I didn't get the question. So you can at the end maybe you can ask. You can stay in the call. Then there is integration testing. Why integration testing is important? What advantages or disadvantages it has? So these things you can think of. Then there are miscellaneous things which you can think of, like having an error boundary. I'll just show. Okay. No. Then there can be miscellaneous things which you can talk about, like if there is a long list, let's say you have a lot of list items in your website. So virtualization, you can, how will you implement virtualization? You can talk about that. There is error boundaries. There is logging mechanism. You can talk about all this stuff. So what virtualization is, basically I have told earlier, right? In like, if you have a long list of item in, especially in infinite scrolling, so it will just create a lot of DOM components as you scroll. So what virtualization does is, it will just have a look at the viewport and the application, and if the item is not in the viewport, it will remove that item from the DOM. So in this way, we just have specific number of items in the DOM, and we don't spam, we don't overload our DOM, because if we overload our DOM a lot, it will cause a lot of performance issues and eventually the site will crash. So you just need to know what are the advantages and disadvantages of using a virtualization. So there are definitely disadvantages as well, which you need to think of. And do you need virtualization in any of your case? Error boundaries, again, like I discussed above, it can be part of above the fold, below the fold. Yeah, this can be used above the fold. So error boundaries is something, if you are facing, if the page crashes, so it will, if your component crashes, it won't crash your whole page. Instead, that just one component would not be hidden. And here you can use some logging mechanism as well to check if what exactly is the error. Then we have a logging mechanisms where we have tools like Sentry, we have tools like Neuralink. So even Flipkart also uses Neuralink. If you go and just go, so if you go to the fetch call for Flipkart homepage, you can just see these things, right? NRBR. What is this BAM NR? NR is basically Neuralink. So we are pushing data into Neuralink every time, and we have a dashboard to see. So basically, if there is any error, we can handle error via Neuralink. So we will push the data in Neuralink. This is a post call, and we are pushing something. So this you won't be understanding, but once you start working with that, you can check it. So basically, New Relic is something you can use, or Sentry, and you can push your data to your server and you can basically check. So New Relic and Sentry are like some of the good tools which you can use. And then the above fold UI, above fold and below fold. So what this thing actually does is, let's say your page is like your page has 20 different components, and when someone loads it on the mobile, only the first 10 components would be seen, and on scroll the next 10 components would be seen. So in that case, what you can do is make two different API calls. The first one would be above and the second one would be below wala. So as soon as the above wala, instead of bringing all the data in one call, you can split it into two calls. So doing that would make your API response smaller and eventually faster load time. So that thing is something you can use above fold and below fold. So you can read more about it. It's like a very interesting thing. Even Flipkart uses that. Used to, Flipkart used to do that, above fold and below fold. Now we don't. Uh, Grafana also, you can push your logs to Grafana. You can use it. I have never used it, so I didn't mention it. You can add analytics, like, yeah, you can use Google Analytics or other analytics. You can add it, analytics. Analytics is very important to measure the business performance. Again, if you go to Flipkart site, right? So you will see the business calls. So these business calls are basically rom dot. So it is going to the slash business and it is again posting something. And what it is posting, you won't be able to get it because it's something different. So these business calls are basically the analytics call, which the product people use to check how are their experiments performing or how are the things performing on website. So this is basically the analytics part. So analytics can be used. You can use to analytical tools to basically monitor the analytics of your website. Then we have offline experience. Offline experience. So here you can talk about progressive web app. Here you can talk about uh, index DB, service worker. So this is a very interesting topic which These things are basically something which can help you to impress your interviewer. So these are some like kind of advanced topic, but if you speak about it, it would be very good. So progressive web app, IndexedDB. So IndexedDB is browsers provided database kind of thing, you can say, where you can store some data. It provides functionalities similar to databases. So this thing you can talk about how much, what exactly, how will you make your app a progressive web app? How will you use IndexedDB? Where would you use local storage to store data? Or those things you can talk about. Local storage won't come actually here. So these are the things for offline experience, you can say. Then again, performance optimization is another thing which does Flipkart use any of the offline experiences? Yeah, so Flipkart has service workers installed, and there are lot. But there was lot of thing I haven't checked it earlier, but we have many internal tools where we have implemented these things. System design process done at the beginning of project. Will it again used during implementation or scalability? Mostly it is taken care at the beginning of the project, but there are some things like performance optimization. Then there are things like error boundaries, logging mechanism. These are the things testing. These are the things which will go on again and again. So it would never end. So there are few parts which would be finished at the starting, but there would be many parts which would go on, keep on going. So it's kind of never ending thing. But most of the things are being set up at the initial stages itself. So not a big deal. You can just start. Mostly it's starting only. And then for the performance optimization, we have things like, so these are the basic things which you must be aware of. I'll just paste the things over here. So we have a lighthouse. You must be aware of lighthouse test cases. So you can just, if you go to your browser and there is a lighthouse tab, you can run the test cases over here. Matlab, it will just tell you how good your or how bad your website is based on various parameters. So you can check on any website. You can use Lighthouse for optimizing performance. We have code splitting, lazy loading. These are the things I think you must be aware of. Memoization is something. So here we have use memo and use callback things, React pure components. We have API caching. So these are the thing. We have animation and asset handling, like we can use CDN. We can do the lazy load, eager load for images. So mostly asset handling is something which you need to take a lot of your time, because in e-commerce site, if you say, assets are the most important things, like the images are something. So if you open Flipkart website, it's just images, right? You are seeing images everywhere. So image handling becomes very important in case of any image centric website. So you can use CDN, you can use the caching policy for CDN. You can add a good caching policy. Then locally you can, there are some assets which you can store in the code as well. You don't need to make a network call for more important things. Image loading, whether lazy load or eager load. So what is eager load? You can Google it. I don't want to expand right now. So eager load is basically as soon as the data comes to the UI, it will render it without the what you say, without even waiting. So eager load is as soon as the DOM comes, it will load. The lazy load will load the image at that time, when it comes into viewport. So it won't load immediately, but at some later point of time. Then we have lazy load CSS. We have async defer, which again you must guys be aware of. So I won't go dive deep into these things. And then we have image caching. So the thing I mentioned here, caching policy. So this thing you can mention here as well. And then we have scrolling performances. So there are some things where you need to scroll a lot. So scrolling is a very heavy operation, if you guys know. So scrolling is something which you can optimize. So you can use things like intersection observer. Yeah, correct. Intersection observer. So this is something you can explain to them. So this is again intersection observer is something which you can say to the interviewer. So then matlab, I'm just saying what are things you can say. So you don't necessarily have to say all these things which you have written here, because the rounds would be just 1 hour rounds, correct? So in 1 hour, how much you will say, because there will be cross questioning also, and a lot of time will go there as well. So you can just think on what to say and what not to say. So it's up to you how you drive the conversation. So these are all the possibilities I am saying, like which you can think of. Then there is some design patterns which you can talk about. So in React, we have HOC design patterns. Uh, we have design patterns like render props, hooks design pattern. So these things are something you can, there are thousands of design patterns you can think of. You can just go through the top 5, 6 design patterns and mention them in your mention them and why or why not it should be used. So whatever you are saying, the point is you should be aware of it, ki why I am using it. If I am using it, why? And what are the advantages and disadvantages? If you are not aware of these things, don't mention that point. So if you are not aware what HOC design pattern is or what are the disadvantages of it, don't mention it. Because if you are saying something, the interviewer will ask, what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage? So you need to be aware of the advantages, disadvantages, full front to back. You should be aware of any design pattern. Yes. So SVGs, I think you can put it in the code or you can put outside as well. But images, it's better to use a CDN, load it from outside. Don't put it inside JavaScript. Will we be discussing these topics? Yeah, we will be discussing these topics in next sessions in detail. So this is just a very intro part. Where can we use things like browser stack? So browser stack is basically, I believe, used for testing, right? So browser stack can be used in this testing part only. I haven't used browser stack much, so can't say about that. Is there any tool which help us how much time any specific component takes time to load on web page? So this I think is there in the React dev tool. So if you go to inspect and so you have to install the extension React dev tools. So once you install those extension, there will be 2 more tabs over here. So with that, you can check a lot of things, how much time your uh, component is taking. You have React profiler as well in that case. So the yes, profiler can be used. Profiler is something which will help you which component is taking how much time and how you can improve it. So these are the things basically. And apart from that, rendering strategy, you can think of the server side. We have already discussed it. We have we can think of accessibility. Accessibility is something which can take some of your time. So localization is something, internationalization is something. So this is again advanced. You can mention this thing, but not a mandatory thing. It would be a good, but not a mandate kind of thing. So you can talk about internationalization. How would you achieve it? You can talk about localization and how you can achieve it. So basically, these are the pretty much things so which you can expect in your system design. So if you see whole of the front end thing which you have learned, right? everything is available over here. So you have to think uh, how what are the possible combinations which user can do. You have to design a diagram, you have to make API contract, you have to tell about each technology, REST API, GraphQL, Socket IO. There are tech choices. So basically the point here is you need to know about everything. Like let's say the everything you have learned in frontend, you should be knowing about it: testing, coding standard, folder structure, test virtualization, error boundaries, above fold, below fold analytics. Like there are all the things which you have seen in your application. You can expect it here. So everything and anything and everything is important over here. So this is something uh, which is like most of the people currently face problem in system design round. So mostly people fail in system design round only in most of the companies, and this is the reason why, because the things you have to prepare for a system design round is very huge. You can see it over here. So hope you guys got it. Like, so for the first session, I have kept the scope to this much only, where I will be just going through what all things. In the future few sessions, I'll just go on to go on in depth for each of these topics. Like we can go into depth for REST APIs, GraphQL, socket calls, and these things, and few more topics. Can you share all the please share this sheet. I don't know if I can share this sheet, but let me check. Okay, we have. Yes. You guys can access this link. I think I'll share it in Telegram, rather. I'll export it as an image and I will share it in Telegram for you guys to share, check. So if you guys have no, matlab, have you guys joined the Telegram group? Like you can check that first. So there I'll be sharing this image. This is a very basic image, not something which you guys need to be. Which you need to follow. It's just a basic thing. Sorry. So in the future session, we'll be diving deep into each of these topic one at a time. Matlab maybe in one session we can just think why these all things are important: server side rendering, polling, long polling. In one another, we can just think about why coding standards are important. Miscellaneous thing we can cover in one session. And in the future session, what I'm planning is we will go through the case study. Let's say I'm planning for a few things, like one for the Flipkart website, one for a Google Sheet. If you guys Telegram group, okay, I'll share the Telegram link as well. You can check. You can join Telegram via this link I have shared. So I'll share the image over there. So what future plans are for the next 4 5 sessions? I'll go deep dive into each of these topics, and after that we'll be working on case study, one for the Flipkart website, one for the Google Sheet. If you guys know Google, if you have used Google Sheets, so you can just it's an online spreadsheet editor. So if you guys go to Sheets, so you can just create matlab we will be creating a Google Sheets basically, how the how we will be doing the design, how will be, what all tech we will be using, why we will be using, and those stuff. We will do a live kind of system design round, and we'll get to know what things we need to take care of, what uh, how we will be approaching the question and all those stuff. Apart from Google Sheet, what else I am planning is Facebook kind of messenger, Facebook or Instagram feed you have, right? So that are again, I'll explain, matlab, I will tell more in the group later. So for this session, I had this much only. If you guys have anything to ask, you can. If you guys have anything to ask, you can ask. Also, one more thing. So if you guys have enjoyed this session, feel free to post it on LinkedIn or any social media, Twitter or LinkedIn, anywhere you want. That would help us to grow. Up to you. If you just liked it, there will be more sessions you can join in. And so this is a very intro session, nothing much explained. So this is just what all things you can expect. In future session, we will definitely go dive. Yeah, once again, I'm saying, like, if you liked it, please share it on LinkedIn. And if you have any question, please share it right away. For the future sessions, if you guys have, matlab, you guys have registered, right? So you will get an email about our future sessions as well. I'll post on LinkedIn and Telegram as well, so you guys can follow from there. So if you guys have any question, you may ask. If not, you may drop, or if you have any suggestions, you can post that as well for future session, for anything like if the voice is not clear or any other suggestion to grow. So yeah. WhatsApp, I don't prefer that much WhatsApp for, matlab, so that's the reason I am not building a WhatsApp community. I'll think of it, but can't say as of now. How to implement mix of CSR or, so this thing we will be implement a mix of CSR and SSR. So this thing is something, SSR, basically what it does is it will render a web page from the server. So what you can do is you can just render the skeleton. So basically the nav bar at the top, the side and the footer part, you can do a server side rendering. And for client side rendering, you can just make the API call to get the data. So when the page loads, basically, so you will be having a skeleton, so that will help for SEO, and with the client side you can just populate the data. So that's how you can implement a mix there, and we will cover more about it in future sessions. So yeah, for DSA frontend, should company expect to, you can do in any language. It's not a compulsion from them. You can use JavaScript, you can use Java, you can use Golang, you can use whatever you want to do. The logic is what they check, not the language. Recording, I won't say as of, I cannot say as of now. I'll provide the recording, but maybe like after few days, not now. Okay, WhatsApp, I'll just try WhatsApp community. I'll update you guys in the group. Which component library Flipkart use? Flipkart has its own component library. We have built our own, so we don't use any third party. What will be the easiest and the toughest question? Easiest question, I don't think there would be any easiest question. The easiest question which I found is the autocomplete wala thing which you can study. So autocomplete is one of the easy question, but not the easiest one. Definitely, it also has its complexity. The toughest one can go as tough as a code sandbox kind of thing. So that would be a very difficult choice to make. Um, so there is no easy or tough question. Everything is tough over here. So I would say. How do we add security to a website? So security is something. Okay, I think I missed security. Yes. So security, I think, yeah, I missed that part in the case. So security also, we need to have a block for security as well. So security is something basically which you can say that uh, using iframes, if you should not use you should have a this thing. So I'm just forgetting the name. What it was. Dun-dun. One second. Yeah, you can implement content security policy. CSP is one thing which I think I missed the security part. So these things you can add. We will cover it later. I'll just add it over here. CSP is, sorry, security. So sanitization of inputs. So if user should not be able to send HTML tags or some script via the input tag, CSP is something content security policy. So here again, we have a lot of things to be covered. We'll cover in future sessions in depth for each of this. Sanitization, CSP, iframe usage. Iframe is something which a lot of people use, but they don't know the disadvantages of using iframes. And there are more things we'll discuss later. What tech stack used for that? For what? I didn't get. Acha, for the component library you are asking, what tech stack? So we use JavaScript, TypeScript for that custom CSS. How can we make our own component library? It's very easy to make your own component library. Uh, so you can just Google it. You can create a repo. You can just make different components and how can you make so this you can Google it. It's a very simple thing. You can make your own component and export it on the index file. That would be a good to go thing. SSR and CSR mix. So what tech stack used for that SSR and CSR? So in Flipkart we have used React 18. So for server side rendering we use React 18. We haven't moved to Next.js yet, at least on the desktop side. So for SSR, we use React 18. We hydrate it on the server and push it to UI. And for the CSR, we use our normal React.js in front end. Using monorepo or micro front end. So does Flipkart use monorepo or micro front end? So Flipkart for the desktop side, it is monorepo. For the app and mobile side, it's micro front-end architecture. What is Storybook? How to build components? Storybook is, I think, the same thing for building your own UI library. So you can explore Storybook as well. We don't discuss about this. This thing again, I missed. I think CSS. So CSS preprocessor is something you can definitely add in your tech choices. CSS, preprocessors, less CSS, etc. There are more preprocessor you can use. So preprocessors, if you guys don't know, they have a lot of powers. You can use loops and many other stuff. It will make your CSS writing very easy, and it's very powerful basically. So you can integrate those things as well. Uh, So you can CSRF is again something which you can check upon that can be in the security point of view. CSRF. CSRF. CSRF is basically cross-site attacks. It prevents cross-site attacks to your site. So this again we will cover in future. Uh, how can you explain our details if you have time? We'll be very eager to know about it. Uh, we so for the security in detail, I'll have another session most probably like in few weeks. So we can discuss it over there. But the security is not something you can complete in like 5, 10, or 15 minutes. It's a very long thing, and I'll be discussing it in super detail. In short, if you want to think of, then security, you can mention these points: input sanitization, content security policy, CSRF tokens, and other stuff. How to improve loading on homepage due to heavy JavaScript bundle size. So someone asked how to improve loading on homepage due to heavy JavaScript. So here you can use server-side rendering. So most of the things can be server rendered so that initial loading can become a lot less easier. Any resources to convert monorepo to micro frontend? You can Google it. You will find some resources for monorepo thing. Flipkart in prod using any caching mechanism at FPS. Everything needs to be real time. Curious to know. We do have caching. So if you see for the image, if you see where is the image? So if you go to image, you can click on any image headers. So if you see the response headers, we do cache all the images for this max age. So this is like 30 days. So we cache images for 30 days. Apart from that, if you go to what do you say? Session storage, we do store a couple of things, experiments, data, and for the things which are in IndexedDB, we generally have a expiration time of like let's say 30 minutes or 1 hour. So after 1 hour, this IndexedDB generally gets invalidated. So there are a couple of things: AB experiment data we store, we have before database. So these are the things. I cannot share what it is, but we cache a lot of things, and with a storage of generally like 30 minutes or 1 hour. So if you see the network calls, right? So someone mentioned about config driven UI. So this is how we are using config driven UI. I'll just show you one example on our orders page. So if you see the API call, right? So we have a slots data which gets populated from the backend. So based on this slots data, we are rendering the UI. So if you see the second slot, action info, third one is order summary widget. So here this order summary widget is this widget basically. So we are getting the data. This will be a recommendation widget. And if you see, number 3 would be a banner DJ. Banner DJ is basically this recommendation widget which we are seeing. So this is how a config driven UI Flipkart is using. So this is an example. If you want to think of how config-driven UI works, you can check this. How do we scale a website? Scaling is a entirely different thing, so we can think of it later. Uh, what tech stack is used for CSR, Maxwell, how React 18? So I think in React 18, we do have a lot of things for server-side rendering. Had a lot of support for server-side rendering for hydrating the data at the server. So in React 18, so many new things came up. So that's what we are using over there. For old browser, especially on CSS, font design, choose tools like autoprefix and Babels. Uh, Old browser compatibility is something we can use auto prefixers and Babels for that, because Babel generally have polyfills for all of the, it will make polyfills for all of the those things where for all the older browser where some things are not available. So yeah, we can use Babel and other stuff. Does Flipkart have legendary code base? I think it should be legacy code base based on class components. So yeah, we do have few components, so class based component in few places. All the new components are functional only. So how to land product based company with decent DSS skills? Practice. Yeah, think so. If you have any specific question, you can ping me on Telegram anytime. I'll be happy to help you. Do you guys have any other questions? And great session. Thanks. 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 Right. I would say as an SD1 also you should be good with Webpack and Wait, so you should learn it. I've shared the Telegram link. Yes, you mentioned about caching mechanism. So yeah, the what I was saying is you go to Flipkart homepage. For the image part caching, I was saying that we do have cache control with a max age of 30 days. And for other things, we do a lot of storage in our index DB. We have a lot of data which generally get cached for like few minutes, like let's say 30 minutes or 1 hour, which get refreshed later. Then we do use session storage as well, but not that much. At least on the homepage, we are not using much for that. We have local storage for some of the config data. So these were things which is generally not used much, but it's still there. So there are a lot of things we do for caching. So we can come work in some other session. Anything else, guys? If you want to say, we can. Or I think we can drop right as of now. And if you guys liked it, you can post it on LinkedIn or Twitter or anywhere you guys interested. Think so. We can close the session. By For salary package, what is difference between front end and back end? So the salary is same for both, at least in big companies. Not sure about the smaller ones, but Okay, guys, I think I'll be just sure I'll continue. I think I'll. Okay, I'll just turn off the session. I'll just close the session. If you guys have anything, you can just ask Telegram. You can DM me anytime. I'll be happy to help. चलो ठीक है. Bye guys. Have a good day. Enjoy your weekend. Bye bye bye.